5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, and live.
Hello there, we're here with Steve Shuster, and this is the first of the brown bag lunches by NatP. And Steve is gracious to join us because he is a veteran web producer and composer, and over the years has scored a range of original soundtracks for Fortune 500 campaigns, web, film, and TV content, including spots for Polo, the acclaimed Schick Hydro campaign for Clean Break, various Gap spots, a brand new fitness system DVD set, and the Sibs interactive scripted series, as well as My Digital Life for Google and the fuel industries. You can see his resume up there if you scroll up the screen. Now, with such a breadth of work, thanks again for joining us. When did you know you wanted to compose music for media?
Well, thanks for having me, and I think I always knew that I wanted to be in music. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, I just knew that I was passionate about it. And in college I scored a student film. I was running a little low on credits, so I was able to do that as an independent study, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. And I instantly fell in love with the ability to represent the visual with music.
Very cool. So you didn't go to college knowing you wanted to score film?
I did not, no. I was a psychology major.
Wow.
And I just kind of knew that I was passionate about music. I didn't know exactly how to transform that into a career. So I was just lucky enough to be able to follow what I love to do, and finally ended up doing it.
And so, how many years have you been working as a music composer?
I've been working as a music composer for 6 years now.
Wow, exciting. So how does one become a music composer? From the beginning, like you take classes, and then how do you get your first job? And
I think there's no set path. I think everyone probably arrives at their career in whatever way or form it happens. For me, I really just, again, really loved doing it, and it was a very kind of humbling path to find work at first. And a lot of the work I did was on spec for free for a lot of, opportunities to try and just get known, to get the foot in the door. It's a very saturated and somewhat competitive business with a lot of people that are very talented and have been doing it for a long time. So I kind of just did whatever I could to start building up a reel, and then, it was a slow kind of building process, brick by brick, and 6 years, then you have a little bit of work.
And roughly, how many specs do you think you had to do for free?
That's a great question. I think that I probably spent my first 2 years doing spec work, and sometimes they would pay for demos, like ad agencies or music houses that had me write for them. They would pay a little bit for demos, not always, but sometimes. And really, for me, it was just important to show these potential new clients that I could deliver on time, a quality product, and on message for them. So
now let's wear the other hat. I know there's a lot of independent producers out there who need music for their films. How do you recommend to them going about finding an affordable composer for them and someone who's compatible with their project?
Right. Well, I think you have to be willing to take chances and some risks. So, I personally have done my best to just kind of reach out to people that I've researched or that I like their work, and to take that chance and to put yourself out there is a little scary, but I mean, the worst someone can say is no. And I mean, I'm always interested in working with something new and something original, so it doesn't hurt to send someone an email or whatever, meet them at a conference or something, but you always want to obviously be respectful of their time and professional.
So now, in terms of your aesthetic, what do you consider to be the 3 most influential music scores of all time?
Well, there's a lot out there. I mean, I think the most recent stuff I've seen, I really like the Chipotle commercial with Willie Nelson covering Coldplay. Anything that elicits a real emotional response without overshadowing the message is great. I mean, that's what I try and go for always. There's a ton of them out there. I like whenever Air does something. Anything that can really be represented well by the music that really emphasizes the visual is always very exciting for me to see.
Anything that you can speak to which you think totally missed the mark as like grand disasters in music scoring?
Well, that's a funny question. I think that, you know, you can tell when it doesn't work, and it's a shame. It's a bummer when someone works really hard on the film and the script, and the music doesn't work. And 9 times out of 10, the viewer, especially if they're not in the business, will watch something and won't know exactly why it doesn't sound great or look great or why it doesn't sit well with them. But music 9 times out of 10 is kind of the silent killer, if you will, if it's not done right, you know? Doesn't mean it has to be a specific format or form or genre or anything, but it definitely has to, it's very important that it works.
So maybe the music isn't right for the project. Do you also ever lose sleep at night thinking about the devices that the music is going to be played on? Like some tinny PC speakers or an old television? And how do you prepare for those possible different audio experiences of the viewer?
Yeah, that's something that is very important and somewhat central to what I do, because I work on, at GRaiNey Pictures, a lot of interactive branded campaigns, and the last one we did for Google called My Digital Life was going to be played a lot on laptops. So as a composer, producer, I want to make sure that the sound really cuts through the laptop speakers. It sounds good, you can hear the melody, you know, the mix is right, so it doesn't sound, you know, too weird. You can drive yourself crazy listening to it on a bunch of different devices. You'll hear a different thing every time. So I really, you know, I really love that there's so many great high quality systems out there, and the production value has come up over time, and the cost has gone a little bit down for software and that sort of thing. But it's really important to make sure that it sounds like it will cut through on a laptop. The only thing that I do lose sleep over is when I send out a demo I've worked on for a long time, and the person listening to it pulls out their iPhone with no headphones and they're just listening to it on speaker, and it's like, I don't even know if they can hear all the instruments. So that's one thing. You know, you could have a great record being played through a you know, speakerphone, it won't sound great. So
are most of your projects new media projects, or are they evenly split over the channels of
I think that they're mostly new media. We just finished at GRaiNey Pictures a fitness DVD set, so that was something that was obviously home video. And when you asked me earlier about doing spec work and that sort of thing, my spec work kind of merged into doing work for pay, because when I started doing interactive work, a lot of the brands and the agencies were just kind of jumping into online video and branded content. And so the budgets were either not there or very small. So I was very fortunate in the sense that, you know, I was there at kind of the right time as that started to happen.
Okay. Now, to get into some technical details for some of the independent producers out there, how do you compensate for aggressive sound effects on the track when you're creating music for a piece of media?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I actually, especially with our interactive campaigns, it's a lot of choose your own adventure style on the screen, where there's a lot of different graphics, and a lot of, with the graphics come sound effects. And I think that a lot of times with a door closing, some Foley like that, or some basic transitional sound effects, it's pretty predictable, and you know, you can kind of write as you would normally and just make sure the mix is appropriate. the thing with the interactive campaigns that makes it a little bit interesting is we won't get all of the web developed items until sometimes later. So I'll start to write something and realize, oh, you know what, this is not, they're not going to have music here because there's going to be a big kind of transition graphics effects thing. So that's a little bit hairy, and I think the way that I try to approach that situation is by communicating openly with the producer and the editors and just making sure I understand what they're doing so I can kind of keep out of their way.
And now, talking about understanding what the editors are doing, the producers are doing, so when you're designing a project's musical soundscape, what's the most difficult part of that process for you?
Well, I always want to make sure that I don't take over the scene with the music if that's not what's wanted, obviously. Got to make sure that the message is actually supported by the music and enhanced by the music. And also just the concept of, you know, what style we're going to do with Google's My Digital Life, because it was heavy on the kind of new media digital lifestyle. I chose to go with a score that was kind of light tech, so there was a little bit of electronic instrumentation in there with some more organic stuff because the demo was for young and old. But yeah, that's the most important thing, I think, is just kind of thinking of what style is great. And as a music producer, it's always great to get a reference from the producer. I really like this song, I really like, you know, and the more specific the better.
To have their input, know what feeling they're going for. So we have one question from our viewers. They want to know how to hire someone like you.
That's a great question. Probably the easiest thing is just to go to websites, gpixer.com. You can just email people directly, and don't be afraid to ask for someone's help. I don't think there's anything to be afraid or concerned about. We're all kind of in the same boat.
Do you still work on spec, or is that over for you?
Well, I haven't had to in a little while, which I'm extremely grateful for, but I definitely want to help out people that have interesting projects, because, you know, I had this music teacher in high school that said you're only as good as your next gig. And so for me, what that means is everything I approach is just as important as the next one or the last one.
Now, looking into the future of television and home theater, where do you think it's going?
I think it's a very exciting time, and it's already started to merge new media, computers, and television, and mobile. So in that sense, I really like that everything's kind of becoming universally intertwined and connected. And I think it's fascinating to have a lot of on-demand programming, a lot more interaction, and so I think it's a good thing. I think it makes room for a lot of more innovative projects.
Everyone talks about how it is going to affect the content itself. How do you think it's going to affect music scores, if at all?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
Everyone talks about how the future of TV and
Sure.
of the new ways of consuming TV is going to affect content itself. How do you think it's going to affect music scores of that content?
Well, as the content grows, you need music. And I don't think music's going anywhere, and content's certainly not going anywhere. So the more programming, the more music that will be needed. It really comes down to the consumer, what they want. It's more of like a, they say, buyer's market for buying a house. It's a consumer's market for demand. They choose it.
Well, something more specific to the actual theater experience, what do you think that the widespread expansion of digital 3D theaters could mean any further innovation in music competition, where it's whether it's like a punch with a certain sounds or some more challenges that may bring?
I mean, that's a really fascinating aspect that I feel like is somewhat underdeveloped, because I did work on a project for UCLA's Neurological Center, and they actually had a 3D setup on the computer that was scored. So I think that it has potential, it's just not quite there. And if there's a way to somehow have it on a laptop, you know, hologram, whatever, I think it could be really cool, because then you're not just scoring 2D, obviously. With 3D, you're really scoring things moving around, and there's, you know, if you think about a planetarium, for example, and just all the different elements that you can assign sound to, it could be really, as a composer, it would be really fun.
You mentioned assigning sound, and when you have sometimes different music for different individual characters, what do you think about assigning music to individual characters rather than using a generic cover track over everything?
Mm-hmm. I think it's, as a music composer, it's a challenge in a good way. I like to be challenged and grow as a musician, and I think that there's a lot of room for creativity with that, with assigning characters their own sound, or doing variations on a theme for different characters, you know, changing from minor to major or whatever, with the reveals. But, you know, again, it comes back to, it's the director's vision, it's, you know, the people that write the script, it's what they want. So I've seen it work where it achieves that, and when it doesn't work, it's kind of overkill. So it really just depends on the project.
So now a little bit more fun. What's your favorite takeout meal of choice when you're staying up late and designing a new score?
My favorite takeout meal? Well, you can't go wrong with In-N-Out. I'm a big coffee drinker, and I would definitely have to give Ben & Jerry's a shout out.
Oh, nice choices.
Not the healthiest of choices, I'm sure, but what can I say? I have a sugar tooth.
In-N-Out, you got to go pick up though.
That's true. That's true. Well, when you're working in these kind of dark edit bays or dark, you know, production rooms, you know, if you can get out to walk the dog around the block or see civilization, it's always nice.
So now for the independent producer who maybe doesn't have a big budget to hire someone like you, what's the most important music element that he or she should focus on?
Well, because everything can sound so good today without costing tens of thousands of dollars, I think the first thing you want to do is make sure that whatever track you use sounds good, that the production value is there. Because that's one of the first things people will watch. 2 minutes of your show, and you could have spent a lot of time and effort and resources in making it look amazing, you know, HD in the Amazon, but if the music sounds cheap, then it affects your project negatively right off the bat. So I would definitely focus on production value first.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Steve. This has
Thank
been
you.
Steve Shuster, and you can check him out. Go ahead and say your website or whatever.
Sure, it's gpixar.com, Grainy Pictures, and I operate Grainy Sounds. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And check back in 2 Thursdays from now. We'll have another guest to be determined as we continue our brown bag series.